one today. You'll find that probably tomorrow or early next week. All the live streams we record are posted on the website. All of Pete Stone's videos, all of Steve Newsom's articles, and of course, all the work that Dr. Marcella Weinsnyder is doing with our Cool Induction Institute. So I want to invite everybody again to check out cool.us. And you can also request free professional development for your school or district there. And we would love to connect with you. I also want to let you know that Cool wouldn't exist without a grant from the National Education Association. We were working on the GPS grant, and of course, partnering with their state affiliate here in South Carolina, the SCEA. And right now, you can join the SCEA at no cost until September. So, in other words, you join now on April 30th, you won't pay any dues until September. So, you get the whole month of May, June, July, August, and then September, your dues would start coming out. That gives you an opportunity to see how incredible this organization is and all the benefits that NEA provides. And of course, being a part of an advocacy organization that has three tiers, your local association, your state association, and a national association. And we feel it's important to advocate at all three levels, because if we don't, we're missing out on an important component. It's like a stool, and if you only have one or two legs, it's not going to stand very well. So we have to be advocating at all three levels, and you can do that by joining the SCEA. Well, today we have a special guest. We're being joined by this inspiring leader whose journey really embodies resilience, purpose, and transformation. Her name is Dr. Lashawnte McCray-Sarvis. I've known her for a long time because we both had our formative years in Conway, South Carolina. She is a principal, a speaker, author, and founder of Lee Jane's Counseling. From her beginnings as a single teenage mother in Conway, South Carolina, to earning her PhD in organizational leadership, her path is a powerful example of what perseverance and faith can achieve. With years of experience as both a classroom teacher and school leader, Dr. McCray-Sarvis is deeply committed to creating equitable, empowering learning environments. And she's also the author of 2 books and the host of The Road to an Effective Classroom Environment. And I was honored to be a guest on her show. And on that show, she shares insights to help educators thrive. Today, we're going to dive deep into her story, her work, and what it takes to lead with purpose in today's educational landscape. She has an upcoming book called The Woman, the Vision, the Destiny. We'll invite you to check that book out. But without further ado, let's bring on Dr. Lashawnte McCray-Sarvis. How are you doing today, Lashawnte?
I am awesome. Thank you for having me.
It's good to see you again. And I want to thank you for having me on your show. And I really enjoyed the conversation we had there. And just and maybe in the comments on Facebook, we can post the link to that, because I think your show is great. And I really enjoyed doing that episode with you.
Well, thank you. You were one of my
So,
favorite.
oh, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, obviously, when you share a bio, it captures just a little snapshot of a person. And I always like to give my guests an opportunity to tell a little bit more about themselves that goes beyond the bio, so that we kind of get to know you a little bit better. So feel free to just expand on your bio and tell us a little bit more about Lashawnte.
Okay. Well, the bio, it is a generalization of who I am, and but who I am, I have evolved since those years of being a teenager. No one believes me when I say that I was quiet in school, that I wasn't outspoken. They don't believe me because they look at me now and they say, "Oh, you are very much outspoken." But I have evolved into an individual that has a passion for education, a passion for learning, and there was a point in time in my life when being a teen mom where I did not think that I was going to get to where I am now. I knew I had goals and I knew I had um, ideas of what I wanted to do. I always wanted to go to college, but having young people so young myself,
Yeah.
there were a lot of people back home in Conway that didn't think I was going to make it and even said it. And so I'm happy that I am where I am, um, a thought leader. I'm still
Yeah.
in education, year 29. I love just helping our young people to figure out what it is that they want to do with their lives.
What was maybe it's more than one thing, but can you pinpoint what was the catalyst that where sort of things shifted for you and you knew, okay, I'm going to take the situation that I'm in. I can't go back in time and change that. And you probably wouldn't want to. Well,
No.
what was that sort of pinpoint moment where you said, no, I'm going to, because I can tell you mine, but I want to hear yours. Like, what was your sort of catalyst for change?
So my senior year, because I had my son the first day of school, first day of my senior year, but shortly thereafter I had my daughter, and so when I walked across that stage at Conway High School, I was pregnant, and I had been applying for colleges while I was home on homebound, and the light bulb came on when I had a conversation with a teacher who asked me some very crazy questions, and I said at that point, I am going to college. I don't care what anyone says. That meant my family, my mom, everyone, because they said, how are you going to do it? So I didn't go to where I wanted to. I wanted to go to UNC in Charlotte, but I wanted to stay close to home so I could have that support from my family. So going to Coastal Carolina University was the best choice for me, and it allowed me to go into education, and so the rest becomes history. But that turning point was conversations with that one teacher that was discouraging. It could have been discouraging, but I allowed that to be fuel for my fire, and I started
Mm.
applying to schools and to make sure that I could get into the profession that I wanted to be in and not what someone chose for me.
So that's kind of interesting. So, like, so a teacher said something to you that made you, that was under a lot of circumstances would have discouraged a student, and you just took that and said, like I'm going to take that and I'm going to prove you wrong. Was that kind of like the,
Yes, yes.
yeah.
That teacher, along with, many others that thought, I wasn't going to be able to do it. But that one teacher, and it was a teacher that I loved. Just, I loved everything about her class because it was a challenging class. I was in AP and honors, classes, and so I had a full load of classes my senior year, and this was someone that I, admired, but the things that she was saying to me that day were very discouraging, and I did not really take those very well. I was very, again, quiet, and I kept those things to myself for a long time.
Mhm.
I've just really started speaking out about some of the things that I went through as a young girl then, because I think it helps others to hear my story, um, to know that, what I went through, what I dealt with, but I still overcame those obstacles.
Yeah. It's really, it is, I think it is inspiring. And I think it's inspiring when you share your story, when you're vulnerable enough to say what you were really going through, because I think there's so many other human beings, no matter what the struggle is, other people are sharing that struggle now and are at that pivotal point where they're at this like a crossroads where it's like, where am I going to go? Like
Mhm,
I've got a choice here. I can either like fulfill that narrative
mhm,
around that struggle, or I can say no, and then and find something, some kind of reserve inside yourself to say,
mhm.
I'm not going to let that, I'm not going to let this destroy me, and I'm not going to fill that narrative that society has for me. I'm going to rise above that. Is that sort of where you were, and not only was that where you were, but like what would be your message now to a young woman in a similar situation?
Well, I will say this. It has taken me, and I will say it has taken me a couple of decades to really talk about my life story, because many times in education, we are, as educators, we're discouraged from sharing so much about ourselves. So of
Right.
course you have to, be mindful of how much you do share. But I would share with young girls. There were girls when I was teaching at Carolina Forest that shared with me that they were pregnant before they even told their parents. And
Yeah.
I would be that voice telling them, you need to let them know. And then I would share what, my experience, because with my son, my mom found out the night before I gave birth. But that's a whole nother, probably a whole nother show for another
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do what I do what I do in sharing my story, so that to encourage other young women to know that even if you are in a situation where you are um, a single teen mom, even if you have one person that's in your corner, you can make whatever of yourself that you want to. And my fuel was also making sure that I wanted to be someone my children were proud of. And
Yeah.
I you set an example for them, to let them know that, through hard work, determination, setting your goals, that you can do whatever it is you want to in life. And so they were my encouragement, because I had to go home to those two sets of eyes each day after school and still be mom, and to make sure that they were okay. And I wanted them to know that in this life, no one just hands you anything, that you have to work for it, but you want to make sure that you have your goals set and that you go for it.
Yeah. That's really inspirational. Thank you for sharing that, Lashanta. And I know sometimes it's like you said, it's hard to share those vulnerable moments in our lives, whether it's a like the struggle you're describing, or like for me, it was a mental health struggle,
Mhm.
um, or family issues, addiction or like abuse going on at home, things like that. Those are things that, as we were growing up, our generation kind of was like, you just kind of hide, you don't tell people
Right.
about that, you keep that, you know, on the
Yep.
down low, and I think that was really unhealthy for our generation, and
Mhm.
even more so for the generation before us, because you keep all that stuff bottled up and private, and then you're trying to hide it from everybody, and then that just weighs you down. And once you are able to summon the courage to start sharing that story, like you said, in appropriate ways, and in appropriate channels, it does kind of empower you, because it sort of frees you from any kind of sense of like shame or guilt around it, or any sense of like unworthiness or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, and it helps you realize, no, I'm fully human. This is part of my experience, and it doesn't define me, but it's a part of my story, and it's part of what shaped who I became and who I am today. And I'm not scared
Mhm.
to share that part.
Right.
You have a book coming up called the Woman, the Vision, the Destiny. Um, is your story a little bit more? Do you share the story more in depth in that book? And if you want to, just share with folks about that book that's upcoming.
Yes, I do share everything from my birth up to, I think, about roughly my 30s. The book that preceded that is called My Name is Lashanta, From the Womb to the Woman. And so that was a 5 chapter book. It was just a taste of what you would get in the upcoming book. So the upcoming book goes into more details about different things. And when I shared the second book with them, with my coworkers and so forth, they said, "Well, what happened in this case, and what happened in this scenario?" And I said, "Well, you'll have to, see it in the next one." So I did it on purpose as a teaser, and
Yeah,
it's inspirational, motivational, and I love to laugh. I've gotten to a place in life where, at
yeah,
point in time where I didn't like laughing, I didn't like my smile, and that was, in my early 20s and so forth, and during that time, during the 90s. But now, I'm probably the one that laughs the most at work, and keeping everybody else going, that kind of thing.
yeah. That's cool to hear. So for those watching, Lashanta and I worked together at Carolina Forest High School for a time, and and that's how we get to know each other better. I think our paths probably crossed at Conway High School, or but like where we kind of got to know each other better was at Carolina Forest. And I'd like to. I love hearing your origin story, because I think that in a professional setting we tend. I mean, maybe with a couple of close confidants, we share that origin story, but we tend not to do that with colleagues that we don't know super well. Um, I want to pivot to your professional life, and as you became a teacher and now as an education thought leader. What are some things that your work is focused on now, and what are some things you'd like to share with people about the work that you're doing now?
So I did a rundown of everything that I help people do, and there are a lot there are items that I have written down that I have been working on, and how people formally and informally. One of the things that really um, caught my eye as far as why I began Lee James Consulting was that I saw a need for international teachers to have more support. Um, they get support at the district level and they get support at their schools, but when I was working in um, at Hayward Gibbs Middle School, we would refer to the 29203 as the zip code. If you work in the 29203, you really need to understand and love these children, because they children are the same everywhere. But when it comes down to the community and some of understanding how parents operate and understanding what's going on in the community after the students leave school, um, the international teachers that were coming through that school, had the content knowledge, but sometimes they
Yeah.
the classroom management piece. So
Mhm.
that's why I began the consulting business, because I started with that idea of wanting to help international teachers to be acclimated, and that's working with them one on one with mentoring, because it's an ongoing relationship. It's something that they need support. That is not just once a month where you go to a meeting and your whole group, and you need to talk about the needs and understand that area that you are living in, because most of the teachers they move into those zip codes to live. So work with professional doing professional learning for international teachers, as well as I have my certification from CAP Institute in working and doing coaching. So I do individual as well as group coaching, and that's life coaching and personal development. Um,
I
I,
understand you have a presentation coming up this
yes,
summer at the Southern Regional Education Board. I get that right?
you
SREB?
are correct.
Yeah,
You are
okay.
right.
So do you wanna talk a little bit about what you'll be presenting on?
So in that presentation, because I work at a career center, I work at Hayward Career and Technology Center here in Columbia, South Carolina, where my principal just was awarded SCASA. He is the SCASA Administrator of the Year
Wow.
for South Carolina. So he just found out a couple of days ago. But in working at the Career Center, just wanting to make sure that learning is taking place for the students, where you make learning visible. And so John Hattie has the concept of visible learning, and not just in the academic setting, sorry, not the academic setting, but not just uh, our homeschools, our traditional setting schools, but also in CTE, visible learning is possible. So my presentation talks about how you can implement visible learning to get the student outcomes that you are looking for, and that's pretty much for the students to learn the material and for it to resonate with them and for it to stay. And talking about which strategies has the largest effect size when they're in the classroom.
Yeah. One of the things that is sort of in the forefront of teacher advocacy right now is this idea of these classroom discipline, classroom management, and the sort of behavior of some students. And we're getting a lot of reports of teachers who are being verbally or physically assaulted, sometimes both. And of course, wanting to protect teachers. I think the problem is really complex. Before I share my thoughts on it, which don't represent the SCEA, they're just my own personal thoughts. Before I share my thoughts on it, I'd like to pick your brain around what do you think might be some effective ways we can address this real problem for teachers of just feeling like in certain circumstances that they're really unprotected and aren't really being supported in just being safe and having a reasonably manageable classroom environment.
So this may sound like an unpopular thought, and it may sound strange coming from an administrator, but I will say this, that we as administrators, we need to make sure we are supporting our classroom teachers more. We need to make sure that we're not just doing one more thing when it comes to providing professional learning. You don't want your teachers sitting in professional learning that is not helping them if they need help in how to manage their classrooms. And management goes back to understanding your students. And there's this belief that you're only supposed to work 1 week, the first week of school, and getting to know your students. And a lot of the episodes in my podcast that I put out is about building rapport, relationships, and making the material relevant to your students. And that was the reason why I even began it, because we as administrators, we come in, we are observing, we're seeing, we're doing our walkthroughs, and we're writing down or typing in what we're seeing and what we're hearing. But the next part of that is we have to make sure that we provide feedback, immediate feedback to the teachers, so that they know what are those areas that they need to work on. And we also want to, again, going back to that professional learning, if you know that a teacher does not talk a certain way to students in a way that's going to help them to build relationships and build rapport, have a conversation. Don't just talk about the teacher behind their back, behind closed doors, and then nothing gets solved.
Mm,
Sometimes we as administrators, we want to get into the role of, well, let's get rid of the teacher and let's go ahead and start this process of documenting. Coach your teacher to greatness.
yeah.
You need to be able to coach your teacher to greatness. And it's a two-way street. The teacher has to also be receptive,
Mm,
to know that the person that you're talking with knows what he or she is talking about, that coach, that administrator, that individual knows how to bring about results. And so the educator must be willing to listen as well.
yeah, absolutely. Is it okay if I share my little soapbox thing on this?
Or
And this is still these thoughts are still evolving, and this is why I like to share them with people like you so I can get feedback. I'm not always the most pragmatic person, so I sometimes my thoughts are kind of in a weird space where like I'm just kind of dreaming of what could be. So I want to acknowledge that and also just reiterate that my opinion here is my own, not the SCEA's. But I feel like, when we were at Carolina Forest, I was on the School Improvement Council one year, and I remember we had a meeting of a budget item, and this is when they wanted to install security cameras. And I said, I don't think that's a good idea, because it's not really addressing the root problem here, which is your student violence and not feeling safe and that kind of thing. It's not really addressing. It's reacting to the
Mhm.
problem rather than solving the problem. And the problem is once we get in the habit of reacting to problems, then all we do is we're just reactionary. So like we
Mhm.
start off with the security cameras, then it's the buzzer on the door, then it's the security
Mhm.
officer at the front, then it's metal detectors and bag searches, and and it's just layer upon layer of reactivity, never really addressing what's going on at the root of it. And my thing on this, on the whatever policy we're going to create around protecting teachers and really other students from the disruptions, it's like I'm worried that we're just going to be reactive, that we're going to go back to, we just need to kick kids out of school more, remove them from school, or we need to let teachers have more use physical force if they need to. And those things may be pragmatic, but they seem reactive, and they don't seem to be getting to the root cause of why are kids behaving this way. Because I think kids, it's like a cause and effect.
Mhm.
I feel like we're not looking at the system of education that puts 2 or 3,000 kids in a cinder block building all day, doesn't really let them go outside, doesn't give them much choice, and we've turned them into quasi penitentiaries with all these securities systems that we have. And then there's so many kids rattling around that we have to create these command and control structures where we can't really get to know kids on an individual basis because there's just too many of them to control. And then they feel that they aren't articulating it, but their nervous system feels the dehumanization and then is reacting in a way that is actually sane given the environment that they're in their communities and in the schools that they go into. Never mind like the pressures of standardized testing and what that does to the
Mhm.
relevancy of the curriculum and the pacing of the curriculum, and just looking at kids as like a data point. And so to me, like some of this behavior, it's not that I don't think kids should be held responsible. It's just that what's, if we're not looking at what causes it and all we want to do is hold
Mhm.
the kid responsible, it's like we're not really solving the issue for the child. And
Mhm.
to me, we've got to look at the system and what we're actually do put the environment we're putting kids in and where they're coming from, and trying to ameliorate the conditions of their community, but also like the school culture in a way that can really look at their human issues and address them individually in a way that doesn't, it's not like a one size fits all, back to sort of the zero tolerance or yeah, whatever policies that just wind up, you wind up kicking these kids out of school and then they wind up dropping out, and it's like a school
Mhm.
to prison pipeline. So that's my concern in all of this, is that we're reacting and not really addressing the systemic issues. So I've laid all that out there. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me what you think. Push back, whatever.
Well, I agree with you. Because when those conversations were happening way back then about, the buzzer on the doors, and the when we did finally get the metal detectors, it was different. Even the conversations with the students, they felt like, oh, this is, it felt like a prison, at that point. And now, even in my district, metal detectors are now in, as of what, three, I think this is the third year, are fully in every school. And that's one of my duty areas, is I'm at, metal detector in the morning time, and the kids are coming through, and I can, when the students first started coming through and the beeping is going off,
Yeah,
they get tired of hearing that buzzing, because not only do they go through it at Hayward, they have to go through at their homeschool as well. And
right.
so just taking everything out, it's like the joy in their faces, any joy that they had, it leaves. And so we try to, you know, greet them, and
Yeah,
saying good morning. I'm, saying good morning, and if we see someone that looks upset, or they look down, or if they're frustrated because they have to walk back through, we're trying to make sure that we make the experience better for them, because of where we are right now. Should we have metal detectors in school, at this point in time? I think if schools were smaller in size, if the number of students coming through were smaller, there may not be that need, because
yeah,
you are able to get to know the students a little bit more, a lot better. I think people forget that in these schools, because when we went to Conway High, it was 2,200. You know,
right.
and we have high schools that are still that much, if not more. And it's the kids outnumber the adults. They outnumber the adults, and people don't understand that. So if there is a situation, as much planning that you go through, all these drills, lockdown drills, the kids still outnumber us.
Right.
And so you want to make sure that they're safe, but it goes back to, I agree with you, we have to do more about finding out why our students are acting and reacting the way that they are. I'm all about bringing a student in, seeing if they need counseling. I will talk with students myself, and so that's a part of who I am as well. Is that I'm always looking and watchful to see how students are coming in, and
Mhm.
if they're coming in a way that they're angry, they're frustrated, they're crying, I would be crazy to look away and not address that, because
Yeah,
it's going
I
in.
don't think and I think it's not like sometimes when I talk about this, people feel like, "Well, we have to hold these kids accountable," and I'm like, "Yeah, but we also need to hold politicians accountable who are doing nothing to address poverty, who are doing nothing to address what's going on in some communities, um,
Yeah,
who aren't providing adequate health care uh, to people, including mental health services.
yeah,
There's and we're not holding adults accountable for systems that we adults create. The kids don't create the systems; they're just
right.
in the systems. Like we create the education system, and
Hmm.
we're the ones that have allowed. Educators are the ones who have allowed this accountability system, uh, which has kind of created a lot of the problems because it it forces us to really focus on test scores
Hmm.
rather than the human beings in who they are. And this is one of the things when I critique this, because I hear what you're saying, like, and it's beautiful, like, yeah, they're coming through the metal detectors and there's bag searches. We're trying to smile and make it as humane as we can.
Yes.
The adults in the building are trying to make an inhumane system as humane as they possibly can within that context. They're just as much the victim sort of here in the system, if not more so, because the kids can finally graduate. But the folks like us who've been in the game for a long time,
Hmm.
we have to deal with the system day after day after day after day, year after year.
And
Um,
be tiring. It gets tiresome at times. It can be very tiresome. And I'll admit that the first year of of the metal detectors being in um, full use every day, I was very tired. I was very tired because I hadn't done that since back when I was assistant principal at Loris High School. So
yeah,
metal detectors are coming to Columbia or to Richland One. Um, they were behind the eight ball, and that was actually one of the questions I asked when I was interviewed and came in is, are there metal detectors, because that's what I came from, and coming from Woree.
yeah,
And my mindset is kind of, I feel like we're at a time where we need them, so I'm not
yeah,
against having them in the schools. I
yeah,
think it's a better way to do this so that it's not so cumbersome for our students, and because of how much they have to take out. I understand the whole issue of making sure we are safe, the students are safe. I get that.
yeah,
I As you said, we have to go back to some root causes for a lot of things that are happening, going back to what's going on in the communities, and making sure that our lawmakers know that we can't keep turning a blind eye to certain things.
yeah. I just hate the idea that it feels like we've just given up and we've just said, and because I agree with you. I understand why
Mhm.
there's metal detectors. It's really to make parents and students feel safe after there's been these incidents of violence. And there was one at Carolina Forest High School, there was this incident, and then it was like a week or two later, that's when the metal detectors came in, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and that helps the parents feel like, okay, at least they're doing something about it so that I can send my child there and I feel safer now, right? So it does feel safe, but it's like, to me, does society want to say, okay, we just give in, that's the way it's going to be, and anytime there's this security issue, we'll just layer on more of this, or should the idea be like what? Why don't we work towards getting to a place where we don't need the where, like, shouldn't the goal be at one point in the future, let's try not to even have a need for metal detectors or buzzers or security cameras anymore, where kids can go to school and not feel like they're like being monitored and actually feel safer. Because I do think psychologically, even if it's subtle and and sort of subconscious, when you walk into a building and you have to buzz in and there's security cameras and there's security guards and there's the dogs that come in and do drug searches,
Mhm.
that that sends a message to the nervous system. This place really isn't safe.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, this is not a safe place. This is a place where it can be dangerous. And to me, we as a society the goal should be to create the most safe and healthy environments for kids and students. And it feels like we just keep doubling down on reactivity. That's my thing. But I do get your point of just like
Mhm.
pragmatically, like right now, we can't snap our fingers and make society the way we want it. And we want everyone to be safe like that.
It would be great. You know, if one thing about being at the Career Center, we have very little um, issues when it comes to discipline and so forth. And it would be great to have more schools that were career center oriented because it's
Yeah.
smaller class sizes. You have that opportunity to get to know the students a little bit more. You get to see them doing real world, um, activities, and to me, that would be beneficial because I've fallen in love with CTE, and I see the benefits of it across the board. And I think that if our schools, again, if there were smaller numbers of students that were coming through,
Yeah.
have that opportunity to know, like, went back to when there were the one room schools
Hmm.
and you had every grade level under one building, but that teacher knew the parents,
That's right.
that teacher knew the child, could have his or her back turned and writing on the chalkboard and know if something was thrown across the room, who it was, whether it was Johnny or Valerie.
That's right.
There are just a lot of like you said, this is one of those topics that is there are a lot of different moving parts to it.
Yeah. This
But
brings us back to sort of the where we started, which is, you talk about career and technical education, and I think this is where like we've got to create these moments for kids, that moments that you had, moments like I had, where the light comes on and it says, this is what I want to do with my life. Like now I see the relevance of me really engaging with my education because I see a pathway forward to
Mhm.
elevate my life and to make a great life for myself. And I think that you're right. With career and technical education, you're connecting those kids to this sort of purpose, this idea of, all right, this is something I can invest in, this is something I can be passionate about and do with my life and earn a living and,
Yeah.
and have structure in my life. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think sometimes when a kid's taken, like for me, like I'm taking algebra 2 and I'm like, I don't see how this is ever going to be relevant because I hate this class and I hate everything about it. Like,
Mhm.
but if you allow me to have some time in the day where I can go to a class where I'm like, yeah, I could see myself doing this.
Yeah.
Now I'm fully invested, and that creates that sort of shift
Mhm.
I think for a lot of kids, once they see that their education is relevant to their lives, the behavior and all
Mhm.
the academics kind of come around.
Yep.
Yeah. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you wanna share before we wrap up? It went by so fast that I know we're already like
Yes.
time,
Yes.
but
Um, I do want to mention that if there's anyone that struggles in trying to figure out what it is they want to do, as there was a point in time I thought I was going to be a psychologist, and I was going to have um, my business and my counseling in my home, kind of like the Cosbys.
yeah,
And so that's what I want to do, was to be a psychologist, and I wanted to counsel teens,
yeah,
preteens and teens. And so I went to Coastal and I started with psychology, but I ended up double majoring and adding that education piece. And I knew I was probably going to shift into education just based off of a conversation with, or not a conversation, but hearing a man speak at Clemson University. It was one of the field trips that we went on when we were in the, it was one of the clubs for those that were going into education. So education had been around me. I just didn't know I was going to actually choose it over some other things. But if there's anyone that struggles in trying to understand what it is that you want to do with your life, or if you're just, you feel like you're stuck in certain areas, I did a master class last month about discovering you and unlocking your potential through intentional coaching. So if that's you, that is definitely a resource I would love to get to you, where you can listen to that and go through all of the different steps in trying to figure out discovering who you are.
Do you have a website that you'd like to share with folks?
Yes, my website is leejanesconsultingllc.com.
Lee James
And
Consulting.
my author page is Dr. Lashawnte
Okay.
.org. Just Dr. that might not be it. Let's just go with the webpage.
All right. So is this is it right here? This on the screen, leejamesconsultingllc.com. Is that right?
And Jane, Jane.
Oh, Jane, not James. Lee Jane. Sorry.
Lee James. Yes, it's a combination of my dad's middle name and my mom's.
I got you. So let's see if we got it right now. Lee Jane Consulting. Is that it?
That is.
All right. Cool. All right. Well, Lashawnte, it's always good to see you. Thanks again for having me as a guest on your show, and thanks so much for your time today. And I appreciate you sharing your inspirational story and your thoughts on a variety of topics. And hopefully, folks found this compelling. And we'll check out your new book. And again, her book is called "The Woman, the Vision, the Destiny," and that's going to be out. You said it's a little delay, but like, when would you
probably
get?
this summer?
This summer. So
August.
okay, so by August, look for the book, The Woman, the Vision, the Destiny by Dr. Lashawnte McCray-Sarvis. Lashawnte, it's always great to see you. Thanks so much for your time today.
You as well. Thank you.
Together on another show sometime soon.
Yes.
All right, take care.
You too.
All right, everybody. That was Dr. Lashawnte McCray-Sarvis. Again, her upcoming book, which will be released hopefully this summer, The Woman, the Vision, the Destiny. And if you are in need for some coaching, you can go to her website, leejaneconsultingllc.com, right here, and connect with Lashawnte there. I have a few things I want to share with you before we sign off. First is, as I mentioned before the show started, you can join the SCEA now at jointhescea.org. And you can do that if you are working in a public school in South Carolina. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be a classroom teacher, you can be an administrator, you can be working as a bus driver or cafeteria worker, front office staff, custodian, whatever you're doing. As long as you're working for a public school, we have a membership for you. And you can join right now at no cost until September. So it's a great time to join, to learn about how our collective voice can result in better pay and better working conditions. We have professional learning programs like our live streams, but also our micro-credential programs through NEA, and all kinds of great opportunities for all throughout the year for you to do some professional learning. We have member benefits, NEA, because we're the largest labor union in the country with 3.2 million members across the country. That's just like AARP or any other large organization. You get discounts, things like Costco, things like pet insurance, things like credit card deals, insurance deals, life insurance deals, all kinds of stuff. So lots of stuff there that, honestly, if you take advantage of all those NEA benefits, you can pretty much pay for all of your dues. And those dues you wouldn't even pay till September. Plus, all the member advocacy work that we're doing, trying to create a better school system for you, trying to create those better working conditions. We can do it better if we do it together. Trying to do it alone in silos, we just has shown not to work. In order for us to move things forward, we all have to come together. We have to organize, mobilize, and then work in a sustainable way to create the kind of change that we deserve, that educators deserve and students deserve. A couple of other things. If you are, or someone you know, is an induction teacher, that's teachers in the first 5 years of their career, Cool offers something called Cool Coaching. It's free, it's online, and it's one on one. So, what happens is every Tuesday and Thursday night from 6 to 8 o'clock, these three veteran educators log on to Zoom and they're waiting there for induction teachers to come and join them. And you join and you get put into a breakout room with Angie, Stephanie, or Marcella, and you can ask them questions and get the advice that you need. You can vent with them and they can give you feedback. You can find that every Tuesday and Thursday from 6 to 8 o'clock at cool.us/coaching. It's cool.us/coaching. It's free. You don't have to be a member of the SCEA. So every teacher should be, who's in the first 5 years of their career, who needs that coaching, should take advantage of that. And this is for South Carolina public school teachers only. Want to also mention that if you're not following us over on Instagram or TikTok, you're missing out on some cool stuff with Alex Del Castillo. And I'm going to put those links up here for you you can screenshot it or whatever you want, take a picture with your phone, however you want to do that. But over on Instagram, it's Instagram.com/the_SCEA_. And on TikTok, it's just TikTok.com/@the SCEA. And you'll see stuff like that Alex is doing, which is really great stuff. He does like yoga sessions, mindfulness sessions, and other really cool stuff. And then Pete Stone stuff's over there. And then like from today's conversation, we'll take clips from it and you'll have clips from these conversations. So shorter form pieces will be over there. So if you are on Instagram, make sure you go over to the and find the SCEA on Instagram. If you're on TikTok, make sure you go over there and find the SCEA on TikTok and follow us for all that great content. The last thing I want to mention is, because it's relevant to the conversation we had today, I created a docu-series. It's a 4-part docu-series called Rehumanizing School, and it addresses some of the stuff that Lashawnte and I were talking about today. And it shows a vision of what schools could be like if we prioritized people's humanity instead of treating them like data points and treating them like almost like livestock, and there's these command and control structures that we've built because of the accountability system and because we're trying to do things as cost efficiently as possible. And we wind up with systems where you have to have metal detectors, where you have to have bag searches, where you have to have security cameras. How do we get away from that? How do we build a system where we can remove those things? Well, I don't have all the answers, and neither do the schools that I present in this documentary. But this is a conversation starter. It's a way for us to start that conversation rather than constantly going to these reactive policies and these reactive kind of ideas around how we solve the problems. Maybe it's time for us to have a conversation around the structures, around the structural issues, the systemic issues that are creating a lot of these problems, and so that we can actually get to the root of the dysfunction and solve the problem once and for all, instead of just reacting to it with more security measures, more ideas of like kicking kids out of school or like arming teachers and just draconian nonsense like that. Let's have a conversation about it. So go to cool.us/rehumanizing school. It's a free 4-part series. I want to invite you to watch it, send me feedback on it. If you want to visit these schools, I can facilitate that for you so you can observe what's going on at these schools. It features 2 small schools in rural Southwest Virginia in a county called Floyd County. The county has 1 stoplight in the entire county. There are some amazing things happening at these schools. And I just want to invite you to check it out. It's a documentary I created a couple of years ago, and hopefully some of you folks will watch it. Well, thanks again to Dr. McCray-Sarvis for her time today. Thank you for tuning in and watching. And for Teacher Appreciation Week, I hope that every teacher in the country feels appreciated, because you deserve to be appreciated every day of the year. What you do is important. What you do matters. What you do is challenging and difficult at times. And we at the SCEA love you and support you, and hope that you'll become a part of our organization so that we can love each other together and create the kind of schools that you deserve. Until our next live stream, I hope you have a wonderful week and you take